he was his job was a fire-breathing evil clown in a horror show in Las Vegas, and he hated God, hated Christians, heard about our church, and thought, "I think I could destroy this church," because he thought it's a new church, can't be that many people. The people who come can't be that committed to it yet. And so he thought, if I show up and in the middle of the service, when like the sermon starts, if I get up and punch a few people, throw things, curse people out, like everyone's gonna be like, I don't want to go back. Like, like it's not a good experience, which is actually not like the worst strategy to destroy a church. And so he came and he was just stunned because like he walked in, he's a tough looking guy. It's a huge guy, shaved head, tattoos. And he came in kind of scowling, and everybody just like loved him and was kind to him. And we were playing secular music in the lobby, and he was shocked that he knew the music we were playing. And we started the service with a secular song, and he knew it. It was one of his favorite bands. And he was like, "What is going on?" And we did a top 10. Our church is weird. We did a top 10 list, and he thought, "Why?" Like he literally told me later, he thought, "Am I being punked? Like I don't think it's a real church." And at the end of the service, we were like, "All right, man, thanks for coming. Come back next week." And he was like, "Oh, I forgot to do my thing." Like he got so engrossed in the service, he forgot to destroy it.
Hi there. Welcome to the Intentional Churches podcast. I'm Doug Parks, and I've got today with me the famous Bart Rendell. Bart, what's up?
Yeah, right. All right. I'm good, man. Thank you.
And one of our good friends, Vince Antonucci, is joining us today. This is the last in the series of the Radical Alignment podcast season, where we're going through the Radical Alignment book a little bit, talking about how it was birthed. And then today we get a chance to dive into this one church, one more initiative. It's great. So if you are looking for an easier on-ramp to IC, check out the alignment workshops. We both have in-person and online. So the in-person are throughout the country, and online is periodically starts. It's a way for you and your team to onboard to what IC is trying to do, which is radically align your entire church, board, and staff to radical ownership of the Great Commission in their life. So Vince, welcome to the podcast, man. Can't wait to get into this with you a little bit more. So tell our listeners more about your story, first off, because there are some people out there who may not know you. I know some of our listeners do, but tell us more of your story, of background of, especially how you came to faith.
Yeah. So I grew up in a completely non-Christian home. My mother is Jewish. My father was a professional poker player, gambling addict, con man, ended up on America's Most Wanted. So got that going for me. He, for a very strange reason, by the way, not your typical reason, but anyway.
What reason was he on there?
For embezzling money. I think I've never seen the show, but I think it's typically like you have to kill somebody or rape somebody or something.
Yeah.
He embezzled money from the wrong person, Ted Williams, the famous baseball player. And so they got Ted Williams to appear on the show to try to help find my dad. They found him in 8 minutes. When he was, yeah.
Were you there?
No. So did not go to my parents did not take me to church ever. And I say I never met a Christian. I certainly must have met a Christian, but no one ever identified themselves that way. No one ever mentioned God to me, told me about Jesus, invited me to church. And so I knew nothing, literally nothing about Jesus. And I, on the Easter morning of my sophomore year in college, heard a guy on TV talking about Jesus. First time I ever heard anyone talk about Jesus. And I thought, man, I don't know anything about Jesus. And I think there's a lot of people who believe in him. And I'm pretty sure I could disprove that he ever existed or was whatever they think he was. And so I spent a long time, a lot of hours trying to find evidence to disprove Jesus. I was a pre-law major. I did end up going to law school, so I was into that kind of thing, and ended up running into all the evidence that proves Jesus, and decided to become a Christian before I ever met one. Then met one. Actually, my father got out of prison, he was repeatedly getting into and out of prison, but he got out of prison, and I went to visit him. And he said, and I told him, I said, hey, I decided to become a Christian. He was like, really? Who have you been talking to? And I said, I've never met one. And he was like, do you want to? And I was like, why? And he said, well, there was a guy a pastor who led Bible studies in the prison. I've got his business card. I was like, yeah. So I called him and met with him and became a Christian. And I became a Christian by reading the Bible and read all these stories about Jesus telling people to go and share him, and all these stories in the book of Acts of people sharing Jesus, and thought, man, at some point Christians must have decided we're not doing that anymore, because here I am, 20 years old, grew up in America, wasn't like in some jungle somewhere, and no one ever mentioned Jesus to me. So the way I say it is, I say I had a meeting of all the Christians I knew in my dorm room. So it was just me. And I said, hey, no one's telling anyone about Jesus. If they had, like, I would have heard about it. Does anybody want to be responsible for telling everyone about Jesus? And I was like, well, I'm the only one here, so I'll do it. And so I elected myself and just decided, man, I'm going to tell everybody about Jesus. And yeah, so that's kind of my story and why this is the one thing I am passionate about. This and baseball a little bit, but
Oh,
pretty much it.
who's your team again?
Dodgers.
Dodgers.
Dodgers, boo.
Yeah.
The
I
team
remember
everybody
seeing
loves to hate.
It didn't used to be that way. We weren't good from like 1989 to 2017. So I know right now it's a bad time to be a Dodger fan for others, but yeah,
It's good. Well, Vince, I appreciate you telling your story, and I'm struck. But it's funny, but it's also sad. That
totally.
so much. It's so refreshing to hear you say how you read through the Bible. You in your first exposure to it, the thing that stuck out the most to you was that you should be sharing Jesus if you're following him,
Mhm.
and the sadness about how many Christians miss out on this great adventure of relational evangelism, sharing who Jesus is in their life, and storytelling and all that. And so that's what I see is really rallied around is like we got to call people back to this. And I'm just curious, like you probably are the biggest evangelistic guy I know. Like what keeps your fire going? What keeps you convicted about relational evangelism and practice of it in your life?
Man, that's a great question. I think I have a couple quick answers. One is, it's the one thing Jesus told us to do. Like, I mean, yeah, he told us to do other things, but when he was about to, lift off to heaven, he didn't say, read your Bibles. He didn't say, make sure you pray a lot. Those are all good things. I love those things. The one thing he said was go and make disciples. Or if you read Mark, he said, go and preach the gospel to all creation. If you read Acts, he said, go be my witnesses. And so it's the one thing he told us to do. And somehow, Christians are like, it's okay if I don't do it. Churches are okay. Like churches are okay because, they say the statistics, I think, are 96% of Christians will never share their faith outside their immediate family.
Wow.
And somehow churches are like, that's okay. It's the thing that Jesus told us to do, but it's okay. And so I just can't get away from the fact that it's what Jesus told us to prioritize. And I just know what it's like to live without Jesus, and so it's painful. Like we were made to live in a relationship with Jesus. And if you're not in that, there might be a lot of good things going on in your life, but you're missing out on the thing that you were made for, and you feel it.
Mhm.
People feel that. I did, and I know people do. And so you can try to cover it up with success and relationships and money and possessions, but man, it is hard to live life without God, not to mention the eternity you're going to face without God. And so, yeah, I think it's that. It's what Jesus told us to do, and just the compassion I have for people who, Jesus said, are harassed and helpless like sheep without a
Yeah.
shepherd.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
And Bart, I'm interested in your take on kind of how the church got here, where we delinked the Great Commission and going and telling people about Jesus. Because it's a pattern that I don't think any church leader wakes up and says, "Hey, I'm going to let everybody off the hook for owning the Great Commission." It's like not a it's like a drift, right? Bart, what's
Yeah.
your take on how we got here?
Well, you're asking the one question that I want to ask God about later
Mm.
when I meet him. Like, I don't really, one of the questions I have is like, I don't know, man. I know that we got to 300 and plus thousand churches and millions of people that believe. somehow that really did focus on this. But somewhere along the line, I believe maybe we moved to the lordship of Christ in our lives, and we kinda got stuck there. This is my current theory, is we kinda got stuck in this, we love what Jesus has done, we've given him our lives, we submit to him, and then we enjoy the fellowship of others who have gotten to that place. And what his call was, the Jesus thing I talked about on this podcast was a little bit was he immediately says it's about others. Like Vince is just saying he's giving you examples of Jesus' words to say it was about others. Um, so we're not saved for ourselves, we're saved for others. And so somewhere we we got kind of like stuck in that enjoyment and of the fellowship that comes from fellowshipping with others that have given their life to him. And he's calling us all to go together to a next level of unity on mission. And I think it's probably just normal human nature. I think some of the political divide that's out there has kept us from, you know, kind of losing, appreciating, what's going on in people that don't know him maybe. And I do believe in general, it's really hard to basically lose sight of the mission if you have really close lost friends.
Mhm.
So it's a really simple thing, but I think one of my admonitions I've been thinking about with my kids is like, just follow God every day and make friends with lost people.
Mhm.
I think it's like, it comes down to that. And if you do have these close friendships, and I mean real friendships, not like,
Mhm.
you know, not like surface level engagements, um, then your heart will never, it can't. If you have a real friend that's, is going to spend eternity without God and is struggling in their life because they don't know him, um, then you just can't help but care, like Vince talked about the mission. He talked about obedience, like, yeah, Jesus said to do it. That's definitely true. But then somewhere along the lines, I think we just fell in love with, like I said, the fellowship that goes on when you do get to know him and others.
Mhm.
So anyway, those are just a couple thoughts, man. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly.
No, that's I think you're kinda spot on, and it kinda underscores even kind of a Western American kind of thing that it's about me when it's actually not. How you make it not about you is by reaching and sharing with others. Vince, one last thing, just about your background a little bit, because I want our listeners to hear, relational evangelism in practice in your life. So you're a church planner. I myself been a part of 3 church plants in my lifetime. We all are very convicted. Bart's been a part of a church plant. We're all very convicted around church planting. And you planted it in Virginia, right? Virginia Beach,
Mhm.
right? And then you came to Sin City, to Las Vegas to plant a church. So can you tell our listeners maybe just a story or two of some of the people you've led to Christ here and that means something to you? But I have a feeling because we are the most fun city on the planet that they all have a little little flair to them.
Sure. Well, the first person I led to Jesus when I moved to Las Vegas was a pimp, which was not on my bingo card. When I moved here, if someone had said to me, "Do you think you'll ever lead a pimp to faith?" I would have said, "0 chance." That would be really crazy and cool, but 0 chance that will happen. And it was literally the first thing. It was a weird mix of circumstances that connected us, and he was a new pimp, which is weird. You don't think of there being rookie pimps, but he was kind of a rookie pimp. He had been doing it for about a year. His wife left him when she found out that he was sleeping with his girls, and with his he had a baby, and so that really shook him, and so he was in a bad place in his heart. Not because of being a pimp, but because of his wife and kid. And so he was open to anything that would help him, I think. And, but just didn't believe that he could, uh, that God could love him or forgive him. And the thing that really worked in his life was I shared the story of the prodigal son, and it just like tore him apart. Like he cried. Like he's a relatively tough guy, as probably most pimps are, and not like I've never seen him cry since, but he literally just cried, and he kept saying, "I didn't know I could be loved like that. I didn't know I could be loved like that." And it's really cool. Like one of the things I tell people is the people who you think are least likely to come to Jesus probably are way more likely than you think. And when they do, they tend to be the coolest Christians and the most evangelistic Christians. And that was Travis. He went from being a pimp to becoming a Christian to like his whole life was about reaching lost people to crazy degrees. Our new church that we had started gave out invitation cards. Hey, take a card and give it to a friend, kind of thing. And he would ask for boxes of them. And each week he would say, "Can I get another box?" And he literally would take boxes of them. We found out one of the things he was doing is he'd go to restaurants and just go table to table and say, "Hey, I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to tell you that Jesus changed my life. And if you come to this church and like hand out," we're like, "Man, that's probably not a good idea." But he just wouldn't stop. He'd go to UNLV with a video camera and he'd be like, "Hey, we're out interviewing people today. Can I ask you a few questions?" We were like, "Yeah." And he would ask them questions. And eventually he would ask them questions about Jesus and say, "Hey," however he would get into it, but he would share the gospel with all these students. And again, I'd be like, "I don't know if that's the best method, but I love what you're doing." And he ended up becoming a pastor. And today he's living in Iowa at University of Iowa City, whatever city that is.
Iowa City. It is. That's
Iowa
correct.
City, I
So
think
is
so.
it?
Yeah.
And so
Creative.
and he's still doing all kinds of stuff on campus, leading people to Jesus. And so another crazy story. I don't know how long you want me to take, but I got dozens. But another cool one was we had this person. This isn't typical. What I believe is in relational evangelism and meeting people outside the walls of a church, which is what this whole initiative that we've created is all about. But this was a crazy one where this guy showed up to try and destroy our church. He was his job was a fire breathing evil clown in a horror show in Las Vegas. And he hated God, hated Christians, heard about our church, and thought, "I think I could destroy this church," because he thought it's a new church, can't be that many people. The people who come can't be that committed to it yet. And so he thought, if I show up and in the middle of the service, when like the sermon starts, if I get up and punch a few people, throw things, curse people out, like everyone's gonna be like, "I don't want to go back." Like, like it's not a good experience, which is actually not like the worst strategy to destroy a church. And so he came and he was just stunned because like he walked in, he's a tough looking guy. It's a huge guy, shaved head, tattoos. And he came in kind of scowling and everybody just like loved him and was kind to him. And we were playing secular music in the lobby and he was shocked that he knew the music we were playing. And we started the service with a secular song and he knew it. It was one of his favorite bands. And he was like, "What is going on?" And we did a top 10. Our church is weird. We did a top 10 list. And he thought, why? Like, he literally told me later, he thought, "Am I being punked? Like, I don't think this is a real church." And at the end of the service, we were like, "All right, man, thanks for coming. Come back next week." And he was like, "Oh, I forgot to do my thing." Like he got so engrossed in the service, he forgot to destroy it and just started coming every week. And eventually I met him and got to know him, and just a really cool story, and gave his life to Jesus maybe 9 months later, and ended up leading a bunch of his friends to Jesus, and just all kinds of crazy stories. We ended up, our church somehow, literally, this is a true story, got 7 or 8 or 9 offers to make our church a reality TV show, just because we had so many crazy stories like this. We said no to all those that we were not interested in having a reality TV show. But that's how crazy the stories were, is somehow people kept hearing them and asking us to make a TV show about it. So
Dude, that is awesome. For those of our listeners who don't know you, I wanted them to hear kind of, number one, your story, but then your heart, and then the craziness that when I say living the Great Commission through relational evangelism is the greatest adventure God ever intended, you are a poster child for that, my friend.
that's true.
It's awesome, man. So as we turn a little bit to talk about this initiative, and what's been really sweet is the collaboration between your life's lifelong work around evangelism, and Bart, myself, and the team here. And so, Bart, I thought if you would start off kind of talking about the journey toward engaging Vince in this One More initiative, and then Vince, if you want to add in from your side, kind of how God was leading you already before we ever talked here. So, Bart, you want to head us up?
Sure. Yeah. So, over all of IC's work, Doug, our vision from the get-go was thousands of churches would collaborate to reach millions for Christ. Okay, so we started that journey and we were teaching leadership teams. We created a toolbox with our friends that would help a leadership team be focused on that. And we pretty soon realized by working with our friends in our churches and eventually lots of churches that a board needed to know how to be an elder team or an set of overseers that focused on the Great Commission personally and organizationally. And then we also realized the congregation, including every leader, has got to be focusing their life on this. And we realized, again, just all this learning from our community of churches that we'd lost touch with, kind of like we were talking about earlier, relationships with people that don't know God and lost friends for sure, but also just a simple equipping that might need to be done. So not only the heart, passion for it, and the insight, conviction to wake up, but also then equipping that needed to go on. And so we began to just pray and search for God's direction and how to develop that equipping material. And I've known Vince for years and years, and we go back a long way. And I know where your heart is on this. And a mutual friend of ours, Doug, you do too, the mutual friend, said, I think this has been Vince's heart is to do this very thing, not only, create the wake-up call that churches need, but also then the practical equipping material. And I had no idea the journey you'd been on to that end, Vince. Like you already had, literally, this is the miracle, this in mind, a set of ideas that fit perfectly with what we were discerning from our churches was needed. So
Yeah.
maybe you could talk about that journey a little bit, like Doug was saying, of what was brewing up in you. Cause I love sort of the simple, practical side of what you've built
Yeah.
prior to us even in your thinking.
Right. Yeah. So the church I started here in Las Vegas after 13 years became a campus of another church, which is a great, cool story. But it meant I lost my job, which it wasn't like I got fired. Like that was part of the deal that I chose. And so I was like, man, since I became a Christian, I've led these two churches that were extremely evangelistically focused. And so that's what my life's been about. And I'm like, how is my life going to be about that? Now, obviously, my life needs to be about that as an individual, but how can I help the kingdom in that way? And so as I prayed about it, I felt like, man, I wonder if I could, for 30 years, I've lived this, studied this, led churches in this. And so I thought, I wonder if I could create some sort of church campaign initiative that could help churches to become more evangelistically focused and effective and equip their people. And so I started working on this campaign that I dreamt of, and how I wasn't sure how I'm going to get it out to churches or whatever, but I just thought I'm going to create this. And then this mutual friend of ours I told him that I was doing this, and he said, you need to talk to Doug and Bart, because they have in mind to do exactly what you're doing.
Sure.
And like, maybe there's some way you could do this together. And so we went out together to a very Las Vegas-y kind of restaurant. If you're ever in town, ask Doug or
For
Bart.
lunch. Yeah, right.
Yes, for lunch.
Yep.
It's probably open after lunch and dinner, but yes. It sounds like I'm talking about a strip club. It's not a strip club.
No.
It's a restaurant. But anyway,
Peppermill. Come on, look it up.
Peppermill, very old school.
Peppermill, yep.
That's right.
Really old school Vegas place. So anyway, we went, and you guys said, what are you working on? And I said this, and you went, that's what we're working on. And like I said, there was already, 15, 20, whatever, 15 to 20 years of mutual relationship and trust. And so it was like, man, I feel like God, like you guys, I had all this content plus you guys do, and you guys had the network of churches to actually get it out there for churches to use it, and so it just felt totally like a God ordained thing to me.
Yeah, it was amazing alignment to me.
Yeah.
When we really even got in the room and started talking about it, it was like we were already, thinking the same way. It's pretty
Mhm.
awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible God story, and I think our listeners will appreciate just hearing how God wove it together over the course of time. Bart, I want to come back because this is the end of this season around radical alignment, um, and the new book that we released last fall, Radical Alignment: The Surprising Journey to Becoming an Intentional Church. And can you give our listeners just a framework of what the One More initiative is and how it fits within the strategy of radical alignment for their church?
Yeah. So we went backwards and we ourselves had to search and say, okay, we're discovering that for lasting alignment to the Great Commission to exist, it's got to be pretty top to bottom, all the way through all the roles, and thus the board, leadership team, congregation needed to be equipped. And so, yeah, and so again, it's just a God thing. He really put it on our heart to develop material in personal equipping and evangelism or relational evangelism, and that would be the place we start with the congregation. And so that's really is the place that this fits. But what we also discovered was, well, we weren't in it just to create material, like preaching material for a church to use. We also studied and realized it needed to be, for it to be permanent and lasting, it needed to be rolled out over the series of time, first with leaders and then additional leaders and then to the congregation. And Doug, you may be wanting to talk a little bit about that process, but and then there needed to be an equipping established permanently around uh, evangelism. And so we built an equipping for the One More initiative: share life, share stories, and share Jesus. And Vince already had a model around that. And so that's what we went to work on over the several months, and developed it in use with churches. Was really almost like a campaign that would roll out over time, with an equipping being established permanently inside of a church. And man, it's been super powerful. So that's the overview of, again, the material. It's preaching, teaching, vision casting, and a lot of equipping in how to share life stories in Jesus with progressive groups over the course of about 8 or 10 months.
No, it's great, man. It's great. And while we're sitting here, Vince, I want to ask you, like, yeah, I know you've encountered it through years and years of church leadership, especially with Christians. But a lot of church leaders get tripped up and confused between these two words, discipleship and evangelism. And it brings, when it comes to church strategy, it brings a lot of confusion because I think all three of us would argue you really cannot have true discipling of a believer without relational evangelism being active, because the Great Commission was the point.
Right.
So, and that may be a little like slap in the face to some of our listeners, but if we rejoin those two the way Christ intended and exemplified in the Gospels, where he was showing us how to implement by going, you don't implement by prepping. The going is the preparation. What do you think happens in the believer's heart as they become one aware and activated that truly drives them deeper into to what we would call discipleship, where they're becoming a true disciple of Christ? What is happening in their heart? What's going on in them that you can't get any other way by going to a Bible study or, yeah. What are your thoughts there, Vince?
Yeah. Yeah. First, and I'll try to answer that. But first, I love what you said. You know, the mission is to make disciples, but Jesus didn't mean make disciples from the guy who goes to the church down the street when he shows up at your church, from, make disciples of the Christians who are leaving the boring church and showing up at yours. He might make disciples of people who are not already disciples. And so that the command to make disciples includes evangelism and sharing our faith and bringing people to faith. And if you're a disciple, if you're making a disciple, that person is going to be on mission and living out the Great Commission, or else they're not really a disciple. That's got to be a part of it. But I love your question of what happens in a person when they do this, because one, there's no I don't think there's anything that's gonna cause someone to grow more than being radically aligned to the Great Commission. When you, instead of just being a Christian who is happy to just show up at church on Sunday and read their Bible and pray, but when you're actually living on mission and you're trying to grow a relationship with somebody who's far from God and show them Jesus and the way you're living your life and have dialogue with them about spiritual things, to be able to answer the tough questions that they might have, you're going to grow like crazy. And so churches that want to make disciples and are more focused on, I know a lot of pastors will say to me, I hear it all the time. I heard it this week. My gift is just more discipleship. I'm not really gifted or, focused on evangelism. I'm just more of a discipleship kind of pastor, discipleship kind of guy. And okay, but if you really care about discipling people, you want them to be out there sharing their faith, because nothing's going to disciple them like that. When I became a Christian, it was, as I said, completely not Christian background, but I immediately started sharing my faith with people, and I grew like crazy. And I could name off some people, including Travis. There's two people, and I've been blessed by God to see a couple of thousand people come to faith in the two churches I've started. And there's two people who stick out to me that's like, man, they grew so much that, like, from day one of becoming a Christian from a completely non-Christian point to a year later, we're like, I'd put them up against the best you have in your church, kind of, whatever church you're a part of. And both of them were just people who just said, I'm going to start telling everybody about Jesus. And it just led them to grow. They were just reading their Bibles like crazy and praying like crazy, because you're out on mission, and it's this adventurous, dangerous thing where it's like, I need to know the answers, and I need to be like Jesus, and I need to pray because I can't do this. And so it's just such a driver of spiritual growth in a person. And so I'd say the best way to disciple someone is to get them radically aligned to the Great Commission and actually living this out.
Yeah, let me push a little more, because I know we have some leaders, church leaders that I talk to out there who've given up hope, like that believers won't do this.
Mm.
What do you mean by growth? Like, you're using the word growth. You saw growth in these people as they were actively sharing Jesus with others. What does growth look like? Because that's one of those trip words in church leadership that can really, like, one, a skeptic to what we're trying to say here might say, well, I consider growth deeper Bible knowledge, or I consider growth, spiritual disciplines, or they're giving more than 10%, or
Right.
yeah. So what do you mean by growth?
I mean, I would say, I think there's two decent answers to that, two good answers, and probably no other good answers. Maybe there's other good answers. But I would say growth is becoming more like Jesus. That seems pretty obvious to me. And so if a person's becoming more and more like Christ, you're growing in the way that you're supposed to grow. And if you're not becoming more like Jesus, then whatever you're doing isn't working. And so even if, and we all know some people who know the Bible deeply and at least say that they pray a lot and don't remind you very much of Jesus.
Mm.
The Pharisees knew the Bible inside and out and were committed to the spiritual disciplines and weren't what they were supposed to be. So the other thing I would say is, you're becoming more loving. Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 says, man, if you have everything else and don't have love, it's nothing. And so, and then I guess we could talk about the fruit of the Spirit, but I think that the fruit of the Spirit is saying, are just the evidences of you becoming
Yeah.
more like Jesus. So,
Outcome. Yeah.
so that's what I would mean. And there's a question you didn't ask in what you said. Can I answer it?
Yeah.
You said, that, and I might be getting ahead of where we're supposed to be going. I'm not sure, but you said, I think a lot of leaders have given up hope on people sharing their faith. It's like they're not going to do it, and they've kind of given up on hope, I think you
Yeah,
said.
that's right.
And so I would say that's what I love about what we've created, this initiative we created. Um, in my opinion, the way that evangelism has been taught and modeled for the most part for a lot of years is what I would call a very forced way. And so it's a way that feels forced on us. You're forcing me to do something that I don't feel comfortable with. I then have to force it into my life. It's this unnatural thing that I'm going to try to figure out how do I force into places in my life. I don't know where I'm going to do this or how, but it's going to be forced, and I'm forcing it on other people. They don't want this, and I know they don't want me to just go up and start talking to them about Jesus, but I'm going to force it on them, and so it's all forced. And what I love about what we've created is, I would say it's a natural way of doing evangelism. We could use words like it's a loving way. It is. It's a relational way. It is. But the thing I think that would be most distinctive about it is it's just a natural way of doing evangelism. So the sermons that we've written, and obviously pastors can make those sermons their own, and the book that we've written, we'll probably get into that a little bit, and the equipping seminars that we've created, they're all teaching this natural way of doing evangelism, that it doesn't have to be forced at all. It can fit naturally into who you are naturally, the way you do life naturally, and it doesn't need to be forced at all. And I think when people get a view of that, they realize I can do this. And so people who never, so quick example, I don't know if I'm talking too much, but a quick example. So we wrote this book that we'll probably talk about. And before we were finalizing it, I asked 5 people to read it. And I said, hey, just read this and make sure it makes sense and it's good and there's nothing we're missing or whatever. And so I had a couple different kinds of people read it. But one was this lady named Destiny. She became a Christian. I baptized her 4 years ago, completely non-Christian background. And I just thought, well, she would read it for me. And so she read it. And I didn't hear back from her. The other 4 people, emailed me. I feel so convicted, challenged, encouraged. This book is, all these great stuff. I didn't hear from Destiny. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, she's texted me 2 pictures, and it was of her in a lake baptizing 2 people. And I said, Destiny, what is this? And she said, Vince, before reading that book, I realized I had never talked to anyone about Jesus outside of the lobby of our church and the living room that my small group meets in. Like, I've never mentioned Jesus in my own house with my daughter and my husband, but I've never talked about Jesus outside the lobby of our church and a living room. And I read the book and went, oh, I should be doing this and I can do this. And so I started talking to my friends about Jesus, and 2 of them came to faith, and they said, I guess I need to be baptized. And I said, you want me to do it? And they said, yeah. And I baptized them. I hope that's okay. And I was like, no, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Unless you're reading the book. And so, and there's a lot more to this whole thing than just the book, but just reading the book. And so I think, those people we would get, Destiny would be somebody we gave up on. She's been a Christian for 4 years, never talked to Jesus to anyone about Jesus. She just needed to find a natural way of doing it, and it worked for her.
That's great, Vince. That's great. And, just the Bart, if we're thinking about, what Vince brought to mind for me during that conversation was, if you're old enough to remember, if you're young, you're never going to remember this, but there was a thing that launched called Evangelism Explosion, EE, and it was an equipping kind of thing. And it was, I can't remember the second question ever, but it was, 2 questions you asked: if you were to die tonight, do you know what would happen to you? And what was the second question? Do either of you 2 know it?
I got it right here, but I don't remember.
But I talked to somebody just last week who was involved in the early days of Evangelism Explosion, and they said it was what you just described, Vince. Almost chaotic. Because if you read the Gospels, it's pretty chaotic. There's not order. They're going, people are coming, demons going, like disciples messing up. I mean, it's pretty chaotic. And then they told me there was leadership that changed that brought high control. And you had to be, in essence, become certified in the sales pitch of the 2 questions. And that's when it began to decline. And so I just find it fascinating, Vince, that you're given an example and a story that reflects more the New Testament, and that can we as church leaders get comfortable with it's going to be chaos when you release the people of God, and it's okay. That was his intent, Yeah. So Bart, go ahead, Vince.
I was going to say that Evangelism Explosion, I'm sure it did some good, but it's a perfect example of a forced way of evangelism. You forced it into your Wednesday night, 7 to 8:30. We're going to go out and knock on doors, and you force it on people who didn't want to hear it. You force it in your life. There was nothing natural about that. Same with like Campus Crusade for Christ. I was in Campus Crusade for a year or two. And so there's good things about it, but it was a forced way of evangelism. You go and sit next to a stranger, share the 4 spiritual laws with them, just totally forced. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Vince
think that's
tells
why
this.
people have given up on this.
You tell this great story. It's probably we are going to step on toes a little bit, but it was about going to. I think it was maybe one of those meetings, and then the leaders would gather and they would say, "Well, I led 4 people to Christ. I led 8," and you were like, "Well, where are they?" And right,
Mhm.
and then you're like, "Oh, we don't. I don't really know where they're at." Right, and so that was an epiphany. Maybe just one
They
word about
don't
that.
even know their names. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, I was a brand new Christian, yeah, and they would at the beginning, we had, like, 100 people in this Campus Crusade chapter, and people at the beginning, they would say, "Who's got reports?" And people would be like, "I led 7 people to Christ. I led 3 people to Christ." And the first couple weeks, I was like, "This is awesome." And then, like, the 3rd or 4th week, I was like, I want somebody who was like, "You led 7 people to Christ this week? I'm trying to lead all my friends to Jesus. Like, I have 1 who's kinda, like, getting there. How'd you lead 7?" They're like, "Yeah, with the 4 spiritual laws." And I'm like, "Where are they?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Didn't you ask them to come?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "What are you doing in their lives?" And they're like, "Nothing." And I'm like, "Who are they?" And they're like, "I don't even know their names." And it was just because they taught you to sit next to somebody at lunch in a cafeteria and read the book to them. And at the last thing was, "Will you accept Jesus? Pray this prayer." And 7 people prayed the prayer, which hopefully they really did, but probably they were just like, if I pray it, will you get away?
Get away from me.
Can this be
Leave me.
over with? So
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Like I said, but
uh,
we really are doubling down, Doug, on a couple things, and it is this relational call to live it out and, take it very personally, and then I'll say one more thing that is very grace-filled, but it is serious, like, we do want people in our churches to at least make the commitment, and in the minimum at a minimum through this initiative especially. Um, can you identify a one? And if you can't, and some can't, in your life that's relationally connected, can you at least begin to pray that God would connect you to a one?
mhm.
Like that's where it actually starts. It's that simple.
yeah.
It's moving from conviction to intention and beginning to pray in that direction. So I think it's important for people to realize it is natural, but sometimes you're starting way back at just the prayer side of the equation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, we're gonna run short on time. I knew we would. I knew we could fill more time in this. I want to get into the one more book. And I'm going to start with you, Bart. Um, I called it a 30-day devotional, and you're like, it's not a devotional. It's
Oh,
a
I didn't.
guidebook.
I didn't say it angry.
Oh yeah, you did. And so talk about first what you mean. It's a guidebook, not a devotional. What you see the separation from the two are. And then Vince, I do want to ask you just some reflections on it as you work through it. But Bart, you start off first.
Yeah, it's pretty simple explanation. I think through 30 days, you actually get equipped. Now we built a training and equipping to go with it in our churches so that it marries with the seminars that Vince was talking about to get fully experientially equipped. But our coach, or one more coach at IC, was like, "Hey, dude, this is probably more like a reference. This is more like a guide that you're probably going to use down the road." So it's a 30-day re 30 readings, but ultimately it becomes a guidebook as well that I believe you will refer back to and use again and again.
Okay, and then Vince, let me ask you, like, there is this one more book more inspiration, conviction, pragmatic? Like, what angles in the writing of this thing did you guys get to?
Sure. Yeah. First, I'll say we create it as a 30-day devotional book because most people, if you say, "Hey, read a book," most people are not going to read a book. But there are a lot of Christians who do a daily Bible reading, or at least know they should and feel like, I should. And so this is set up as your 30-day, like, in fact, right now, my wife is doing it as her Bible study, each morning. And every morning, including this morning, true story, she said, "This is so good. This is so good."
Right.
And so she's doing it as her day, like, and she's not, I am a book reader. She's not really a book, she's a book listener. She listens to a lot of books, but she doesn't like to read a lot of books, but she does her Bible study every single day. And so it's 30 days. And so it's set up like that. So when you do it with your church pastor, they're going to read it because it's like, oh, it's a 30-day thing. It's a manageable reading each day. I don't have to read this huge book. But it definitely is inspiring and equipping, for sure. I can't say it's one or the other, but it's going to inspire and convict and challenge people and encourage them that, man, I need to do this, like Destiny. But it also has lots of here's how. Here's how to share your life with somebody. Here's how to share stories. Here's how to listen to their story. Here's how to share your story. Here's how to share Jesus. So much so that Destiny went from I don't know what to do to just the book alone. She's leading people to Jesus. So it is both.
That's good. Well, and Vince, you probably don't even know this yet. We're already getting a request to have it in other language.
Oh, cool.
That quickly. I mean, it
Wow.
is
That's
making
awesome.
that kind of imprint, man.
Let me just say that, but Doug, I just want to visit one thing. If you just, the simplest way to learn about it is we have it at the site, is like Vince said, an individual or a team could be reading that. That's a very simple thing to do because it's so structured, easy for that purpose. And we used our mind, heart, and strength kind of model we created in the Radical Alignment book to be reinforced throughout it as well. So it's very tied together with everything we're trying to teach about this. Very cool.
Well, I want to end, if we can, pragmatically. Like, if you guys can both think about and come up with one very practical step a listener could take tomorrow in leading their church to get people to start thinking more this way. Is there anything that comes to mind for you guys that somebody could do tomorrow or even this weekend, this next weekend they're preaching, or in the next meeting? Are there some pragmatic, simple things they could do to start moving their team, their congregation, board, whatever, more toward this idea of radical alignment to personal ownership of the Great Commission? Vince, you want to go first? Got anything?
Sure. Yeah. There's a question I started when I started working with you guys on this. I started asking pastors when I talk to them. And I'll get to the answer. But I say, let's say somebody in your church, the normal average person in your church, not the best people, not the worst people, just your normal person. It's a Saturday. They look out the window, they see a U-Haul truck across the street, realize, oh, somebody's moving into the empty house across the street. And they watch for a little bit. They realize they're not Christians. However, they realize this family's not Christians. One, would they think God put them across the street from me so I could lead them to Jesus? That's my mission right now. Because they should, according to Jesus. And two, if they thought that, would they think, and I know what to do? Or would they think, I'm supposed to lead them to Jesus and I don't have any idea what to do about it? And so the fact that 96% of Christians will never talk about Jesus outside of their church family and their immediate family says 96% of your people probably either don't think it's their mission or don't know what to do with it. And so I would say the one practical thing I would do is have a conversation with your leadership team, whether that's your elders or your staff, and say, what are we going to do to equip our people to be able to share Jesus with people? It's not okay if we do all these things as a church and don't inspire and especially equip our people to know what to do to reach their neighbors. I think what we've created would be a great option to be an answer to that question. But even if you're like, nah, I'm not going to do your thing, you got to do something to
Mhm.
equip your people to be inspired and to be equipped to reach people because most people don't have a clue what to do.
It's great. Bart, you have anything come to mind?
Quick would be, we teach an idea called the relational reach zone. Actually, we wrote about it in the book a little bit, and how we all have a personal Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and beyond. And so just to pull out a piece of paper, we all have our own personal Acts 1:8 spheres of influence. So just pull out a piece of paper and put your name in the middle of it and just I think this is a pretty cool idea. Make 2 lists. Who is within your relational sphere that you know doesn't know the Lord? Maybe you've not thought about them as a one per se or prayed in that direction. Yeah, the other list you can make on that piece of paper is who do you know that's connected to you that might also be connected to them. Actually, Vince and I have a mutual friend. I saw him today at the gym, and a friend of mine is connected to both of us. And I've recently talked to that guy about the fact that my friend who doesn't know the Lord is connected to him as well. So now, and Vince is actually in this circle as well. So there's 3 of us
Hmm.
who could be praying and connected and thinking and talking about the spiritual influence and ultimately sharing life stories in Jesus with this person. And so you never know how God's going to work in someone's life. So I like those 2 things practically on a piece of paper. Who do I know that doesn't know? Who do I also know that is a believer that I could share in this journey with? I think that'd be a great place to
That's
start.
fantastic. And again, just breaking paradigms. The Great Commission was always intended, like you just described, Bart, to be a team sport, not an individualistic sport, individually owned on the team. So, Vince, thanks for joining us. It's been great, man. I can't wait to get you back on here and talk more about this. Bart, as always, great. And listeners, if you are looking for a simple way to start on this journey or maybe help your board or someone else in your church in this journey toward radical alignment to personal ownership of the Great Commission, the alignment workshop, either in person or online, is a great, easy, takeable step. So check that out on our website, and we'll see you next time.